everyone on this beautiful sunny Sunday day here from California. This is Yolintzli, the host of the Traditions for Peace show on People for People Radio. Welcome to the people in the chat room, and if you're listening in and you decide that you want to be in the chat room sometime, you can just sign up and we'll let you in, and you get to chat with people from all over the country, mostly Scotland, it seems like, and the UK, and some from the United States, like me. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat room or private message to Vanessa if you want to be more private about it. Just put it in all caps so she knows that she should forward it over to me. So, last time we talked about some traditions from Native American traditions in Mexico about ceremonies for honoring, there's a question, for honoring the cycles of life. And we're going to kind of continue with that a little bit. And also talk about some nourishing and cleansing stuff for the springtime. Go over some acupressure ideas too for the spring. And so somebody's, Angel's asking about my avatar name. So it is Yolintzli. So in the Nahuatl language from Mexico, it's very common to have the TZLI be part of a word. And it's just a construct, it's called Tzli, TZLI, so Yolintzli. So you learn something new, how to move your tongue in a different way there. And that's it's a name from Mexico, from the indigenous language in central Mexico, where my family's from, and I just sort of took it as the avatar name in the chat room, and I decided to keep it for my radio name. So, thanks for asking. And it represents the feminine principle of the earth, and you might see a lot of artwork from Mexico is this really beautiful depictions of home life on a farm with the men and the women and the children and the different foods that they eat. We have a calendar hanging up in my kitchen right here. The guy looks like he's coming home from work, from the fields or whatever, and she's there making tortillas. And, we laugh about it because it does seem a little, I don't know, what we've learned about, feminism and probably a big push from the powers that be to get women away from the kitchen and away from what we really love doing. I do, is to nourish people, to feed people really good food. And so that's been one of my passions in life, is to go into cultures of people that I meet and ask them questions about stuff that they did when they were little, or especially if I meet older people, I like to ask them how they prepared food when they were young. And so I have a grandmother she's actually an adopted mother. She adopted me here at my kitchen table where I'm sitting right now, a long time ago, as her daughter. So her name is Grandma Margarita from Mexico. And she taught me a lot of stuff about, how they used to make, for example, a really good drink is called tejuino, Tejuino. And that's, I'll put it in the chat room there, Tejuino, N-O. And that's a really amazing drink. It's an electrolyte drink. And what you do is you just get some Celtic good salt, a lemon or a lime, and some water. And you could put ice in there. People like to grind. In Mexico, they if they have ice, they'll make a drink out of it in a blender with some ice. And that is like so delicious when you're real hot and come in from, working outside in the heat. It'll replace your electrolytes. It's really, really good drink. It's called tejuino. So I was saying about the art from Mexico is a lot of times it's, depicting the family life in a really healthy and beautiful way. So that's where I come from. My grandparents came from Mexico about 100 years ago, or a little bit more, to California. And I was just looking up the town of Cherán in Mexico, in Michoacan, is the place where they overthrew their government about 7 years ago. And it's pretty cool. They've been having really good success because it was the sort of the epicenter of probably the most dangerous place as far as the drug cartels were in Mexico, in this state called Michoacan. So that's where my family's from. And the town where my family is from is actually about an hour's drive from that town. So it's kind of cool. I wonder if I got my rebel spirit from that blood there. Anyhow, that town of Cherán, Mexico, Michoacan, it was 7 years ago. Actually, it was in 2011, so it's about 8 years now. They had started getting really, really difficult, like lots of killings and people getting abducted, and the drugs were just getting really took over everything. And people, it actually started with, there were corporations coming into the area, into the surrounding areas, and illegally cutting down their trees. And this is a group of Indian people from there called the Purepeche people, Purepeche. I'm putting that in the chat room. And in the Mexican Constitution, there's a law that that the indigenous people of Mexico have a right to live in their indigenous ways, in their culture, in their communities, if they choose to. So they're protected. And so they had their village, which is about 20,000 people, was surrounded by woods. It's up way high in the mountains. It's like over 5,000 feet. So I think that's like 2,500 meters, maybe. I don't know. Maybe somebody can figure that out for me. So anyhow, they have their pine forests, and they make a lot of furniture, and they grow pretty quick. But they took really good care of them. And recently, in the past, 20 years or so, there's been a lot of illegal forest corporations coming in and chopping down the forest and lighting it on fire. So they burn everything, and then they take the land over, buy it for nothing, and make them into avocado orchards. And so the Indians, or the people who lived in the area where they originally have had pretty sustainable culture as far as their living and not having to have big corporations in their areas. And in different parts of Mexico, the indigenous people started having to work in these big, huge avocado orchards and become sort of slave labor for the avocado industry. And so they saw that come down the pipeline there, the Purepeche people, and, they just started arming themselves. And I forget where I read somewhere where they got the arms to begin with, but they ran out all the politicians. They ran out the politicians, the sheriff department, the police department, the state police. They don't have any elections. Like, they don't participate in the Mexican presidential elections. And it's been really amazing. The amount of people. I think there's only been, at the time of the one. I think I watched a video that was from about 2 years ago. Only 2 people had gotten killed, and the drugs are they're gone, and they just took everything into their own hands, and so I just wanted to honor them today. Those are giving us ideas and examples for, not that I'm wanting to get involved with an armed revolution or anything, but there's places in Mexico and South America, people are coming up and hanging out with them and talking with them about how to, bring these principles to different places, because basically that's what kind of needs to happen, is the corporations, if they're not going to turn around and start really taking responsibility for, taking care of the earth and honoring the indigenous people, honoring all people, so we don't all have to become slaves to them, they're going to need to get taken down, or they're going to have to fall down somehow. So it's just ideas I wanted to put out there, and I'll find during the break I'll find a couple of the videos and put them on there. So my grandparents came up, as migrant workers. My grandpa worked in the I guess the mills and stuff up in the foothills of the Sierra Madre Mountains here in California. And my grandmother worked in the fields, and she worked in canneries and stuff. So that's who I come from on that side. And I've always been really interested in Mexican food too, because it's so delicious. And so I guess that sort of led me to studying about traditional foods from all over the world. The Weston A. Price Foundation is a really amazing organization that has taken the work of a dentist from the 1930s and 40s who went around the world at that time with his wife, and they studied cultures and food from around the world and came up with these principles of eating that were made for really healthy people. And if you look at Mexican people, their body structures, and African people who are still living or eating their traditional ways, they just have like really strong bodies and really strong workers and stuff. And so I know I've done massage therapy for a really long time, for about 15 years, and I've done acupuncture for about 20 years. So I work with people's bodies, and I get to see a lot of different kinds of bodies and massage them and stuff. And you can see the difference in people who are more removed, like 1 or 2 or 3 generations removed from their indigenous cultures, no matter where they're at. So I think that farmers and stuff are probably more healthy because they're still living really close to the earth. So their bodies tend to be really strong. And part of it is from the food, part of it's from just being active and involved with hard work and stuff. And so one of the things that I wanted to get to today was to really stress about, people ask me about detoxing. And so springtime is a really good time to detox. But it's really, really important to, on top of detoxing, is to make sure you're nourishing yourself adequately. So Red's just saying about McDonald's, probably not very good. That's right. So getting back to really basics about eating is, it's actually not that expensive. It's probably cheaper. Goz is calling me a conspiracy theorist. So I think that part of the domination thing that happened, really, they use the diet and food as a weapon and as a way to weaken us. And so, I mean, this is my theory, or I don't know anybody that's done any work around this. I think I saw it mentioned a couple of different places, but, a vegetarian diet is a really good diet for cleansing. And so if people are really toxic and they have cancer or some really, deep disease that's a big problem, then going on a vegetarian diet for a period of time to cleanse is really good, because you want to get that, all those vegetables are really detoxifying. And so to jumpstart a treatment for deep diseases, or even if you just want to get cleaned up and, get yourself in better health, a vegetarian or macrobiotic diet is not, they're not diets to stay healthy on for long term. And, if anybody has questions or you want to challenge that, please, you can send messages to Vanessa and get them in there. I would love to dialogue about it. And my feeling about it is that they've targeted, forward-thinking people and loving, spiritual, sort of free thinkers with that diet. Most people that I know that are vegetarians are really sweet people. They're people who I love to have as my friends, and unfortunately, most of them are really, really unhealthy. They have severe teeth problems, bones, really brittle and weak bones, it's really hard. I understand, I totally get why people want to be vegetarians because of the whole processing and the way that the commercialism of food has gotten, where it's horrible. So that in itself is a really good reason to be vegetarian. In fact, I was a vegetarian once for about 2 weeks. I had a boyfriend that was vegetarian, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I was young. I was in my 20s, and I didn't eat very much meat to begin with, and I was eating a lot of soy back then because we got targeted with lots of propaganda that soy was really good, especially for women. Turns out it makes people have, women have really difficult menstrual problems and uterine problems, thyroid problems. This is what it's coming out in the research now about soy, which we didn't know back then. I ate a lot of soy back then. So let's take a little sip here. So I'm talking about soy haggis. Oh, I found out about haggis. I didn't know anything. Is that how you pronounce it? They're made out of heart, right? Is that right, you guys? I probably should be eating haggis because I have heart issues sometimes, and so it's actually been doing pretty good. But in Chinese medicine, like treats like. So if people have heart problems, they should probably be eating haggis or haggis. How do you pronounce it? So I remember having a patient where the whole family was the kid was really bad. He was kind of on the verge of being autistic, but they were all had what we call Shen issues, or like emotional disturbance problems. And it was a class in school, in the acupuncture school, where the teacher was treating the whole family, actually. And he asked them about their home and about what the situation in the home was. And they, it turns out they had a lot of junk sitting around. They didn't keep a real tidy home or anything like that. So when we left the classroom when he treated the people, we left and he said, well, these people, they have to eat heart because they have lost their will to be involved with having a beautiful life, basically, because, all this stuff that came out. And so we learn how to ask people about what their home life is like, because it's a huge part of people's health. And so he said that since those people were so really dysfunctional and showing these emotional, really kind of deep emotional problems, that it would take a lot of work. And basically they have to change their diet majorly to nourish themselves and nourish their heart. So the fact that like treats like in Chinese medicine, he was saying that they really need to eat heart meat, and he didn't really even know how to tell them, because I think he just kind of brought it up, but most people kind of goes over their head. But I just want to bring those kinds of things up in my class or in my talks here, because it's really important information. So this time of year, since it's the liver time of year, the springtime, that's the liver is the organ of detoxing. And the liver doesn't actually filter the blood. It doesn't filter the toxins out. It moves it. It moves the toxins through the blood. So it's kind of almost like a generator or something. So it moves it and it separates them and from the healthy blood, and it sends the toxins to like the large intestine and the small intestine and the kidneys to get excreted out. So a lot of people this time of year, if people are having detoxifying issues, like if they're really, really sick with either autism or they just keep getting sick all the time, or they're really weak, or they have cancer or diabetes, any of these real deep, disturbing illnesses. So the best thing is definitely to detox, but also needing to nourish the body. So the domination over and that push to get people to be vegans and vegetarians all the time, I think part of it is to weaken people, because if you keep doing that on and on and on through your life, it's very detrimental. And I have a hard time, I don't want to step on anybody's feet or be pushy or anything like that, or, push people away. But it's a really important thing to be able to nourish yourself, because they made us feel through religion, through education, schools, just, every chance they get to teach us or to try to convince us that we're dirty and that we're stupid and we don't know what's best for us. And, the way that the grandmothers cook, who are they? They're just stupid old ladies and stuff. Hi, Stone. Hey, artist. How you guys? So the nourishing part, there's two parts to eating, and one of them is to nourish yourself, and the other part is to detox. So when one of the very first patients that I ever had when I was in acupuncture school was this guy. He was kind of like a goth guy, one of those goth guys, but he wore all white. It was, instead of black, it was like all white, and he had white hair, super white skin. He wore like white lipstick. He was this really creepy guy, and he only wanted to eat raw food. He was a vegetarian, raw food, and only white food. That's all he would. And so he came for acupuncture. And then he told me and my teacher that he only wanted white herbs and herbs that he could eat. And so that guy was so unhealthy. It was really sad. He had the worst digestive issues of anybody I've ever seen. He was just so weak. His body was like really just wasted. And I treated him and gave him stuff to eat that were white. But I don't know. It was just kind of a really extreme situation. So if you look around the world at all the indigenous cultures around, none of them, Weston A. Price went like all over to cultures that were still totally like unaffected by industrialized food, and he was expecting to find some vegetarian cultures that were really super healthy and stuff and spiritually evolved and everything, and he never found that ever anywhere. And so it was a real surprise to him. He was a dentist and wanted to try to figure out why his patients were not only having such dental problems, but really deep-seated health issues. And so he did come up with principles that were across the board everywhere he went, were these principles of eating that were the same. And it's not that they were eating the same foods, it just there were certain foods that were venerated and really important for the culture, and especially for young people who were at childbirth age. So they would, when, the kids were in adolescence and they were sort of heading into that age where they were going to be thinking about having kids, one of the main things that they would do is to make sure they ate enough animal fat. And so different cultures have different fats that they used. And, like here, the Indians here, the salmon fat was rendered, and they would put them into baskets, the fat, and bury them in their huts or their where they lived. And so they could eat that all winter long. It keeps you warm. It's very good for the brain, and it's really important for the hormones. The hormones cannot, the only way that hormones are created and, developed in the body is through animal fats. So you'll see a lot of strict vegetarians and vegans that, probably might be having some conception or fertility issues, being infertile. And that's probably one of the main reasons. So, so the nourishing part, one thing that if there are vegetarians in the crowds, our teachers used to tell us that if at least we could get them to drink broth, that would be really good if they could just do that. So, I have some vegetarian patients, and I actually make broth, and I freeze it, and I put it in my freezer, and I offer it to them if they could take that and make their soups out of it, because it just has so much minerals. And every single culture that Weston A. Price went to, that was a huge part of their diet, because they all had animals. They all did partake in animal foods. And even in Africa, the most healthy people that he saw were the Maasai in Africa. They were the strongest spiritually, emotionally. I mean, this is not the, crazy religions that go in there and start doing weird stuff with them. This is like people who were not affected by a lot of outside influences, okay? So I'm not talking about, the Muslim religions and things that go in and do crazy stuff there. He went to villages that were still living the old ways, okay, before all that. Dairy products were all raw and fermented, a lot of fermented foods. The animal fats were real important. And there was a lot of places, like in Peru and in different places, they had a lot of sayings in different cultures about how, a good bowl of broth can bring people back from the dead. I mean, it could cure any disease. And, I seriously have had situations where people were so sick, and I just begged them, come on, just make some broth and take it, or here, I sell it to them for $10 for a quart, because they're all organic and pastured and local, the meats and the bones and stuff that I get and use. So it's actually a really pretty good deal for them. Another thing that's really important, so the bone broth would be number one. If you could possibly, or if you don't want to do it and you feel like you might want to be open to it, maybe you could have somebody else make it for you. Or find out if there's any restaurants around you that still make old-fashioned soups the old way, and do it that way. So the other thing is raw egg yolks. We talked about that before. If you're going to eat eggs, it's really good to have those egg yolks be raw or not cooked. So if you're going to have like sunny side up eggs or something, or over easy, to have the egg not be cooked hard, because it's got a lot of lecithin in there that's really good for the brain, and it's got zinc and all kinds of stuff. It's one of the most nourishing foods that there is on the planet, really. And of course, if you can get the pastured and soy-free and all that, that's a really good thing. So I always, when I was doing the GAPS diet, I would put the yolks in my soups, and at first I was kind of squeamish about it, but it actually tastes pretty good. It is very nourishing. As soon as you eat, like if you have a bowl of soup and you put a raw egg yolk in there, mix it in, and you drink that, it's immediate. You will feel this deep, deep, nourishing feeling. And you can't get that from just vegetables. You really can't. And so, I don't know, we can argue about it if anybody wants to. And I don't know if there was any questions. I thought I saw something fly by here earlier from Vanessa, but let's see if I can find that chat thing. Here it is. Okay. So, avatar name. Is that from me? Oh, that's the haggis recipe. Okay. So, yeah, so we talked about fermented foods. And then the Celtic sea salt. You know, we talked about that before, but just want to remind you guys about that to just make sure that you're eating really, really good salt. Especially I've been seeing on the chat here that a lot of people are getting those water distillers. I don't agree with those. I guess if you're in a place that's seriously toxic from mines or something and your water is that bad, yeah, it would probably be good. But I would suggest finding spring water somewhere else that you can get. Finding a source of other water that's not distilled to add to your diet, to drink as much of that as you can, rather than the distilled. Because it takes all the minerals out, and really water is supposed to have minerals in it. That's how people have been drinking it for millions of years, right? I don't agree. I don't usually have my patients take a lot of supplements, and so if you can get your nourishment from food, that is the best. Oh, here's a question. Okay, can she speak about the importance of iodine and pure vitamin C, liposomal, high doses of grams a day, vitamin C? Yeah, iodine's super important. So that Celtic sea salt is a really, really good source of iodine. It's really good for the thyroid. It's a good source of iodine, but most people are probably really deficient in iodine. So the kind of iodine, I usually have people get this stuff called nascent, N-A-S-C-E-N-T iodine, and I have them go through one bottle of that. It's an internal kind of iodine, and so you drink it in water, and that kind of flushes the system, gets it through everywhere. And then go to the Lugel's topical iodine. And the dosage of iodine is kind of, it depends on the person, because like I have a heart issue, right? And so I get racing heart, so I can't do a lot of iodine. There's a in the video section on the People for People radio station, the link there, or the site, you can go into the videos and find there's a lecture about iodine in there, and it's a really, really good lecture. If you're interested in that, definitely look that up and find it and watch that lecture. So there's a lot of different people saying about, or ideas about the dosage. And so for me, what I've had to do is because iodine can, if you have issues like me with your heart, it can make your heart race, okay? So I have to just kind of moderate myself. I mean, I live in a place where there's lots and lots of chemtrails, right? Or there has been in the past. Today it wasn't too bad, but, there were years where people's tomatoes didn't grow because there were so many chemtrails all the time, and there was just like residue on everything. And the kale and everything has this like weird residue on it. And so the iodine is really, really important for detoxification. And eating a lot of soy depletes iodine, and it affects the function of the thyroid. So it makes that whole process of the detoxification using the iodine, it really weakens that. So when they are spraying a lot of chemtrails, or you are exposed to chemicals. One time I was in this town, and there was the town I grew up in was a refinery, and they were refineries and chemical plants, factories and stuff, Shell Chemical and everything. And so I got really toxed out when I was little, I'm sure. A lot of heavy metals probably. And so back then, iodine was in all bread products, everything. It always had an iodine. I guess it's some kind of stabilizer or something. But in the 1970s, I think it was, they just, like some mastermind creep, probably, some Chitahuri, I call them, they decided to take the iodine out of all food products, and they put bromine in there instead, which is a neurotoxin. It's like fluoride. It's really, really toxic for human beings, and they put that in bread now instead of iodine. So, okay, another weapon. So just check if you're buying stuff that's like, factory food, what I call. It's got like a lot of ingredients that you can't pronounce. You better be checking it, make sure there's no bromine in there. So bromine and chlorine and iodine and fluoride, they're all in the same sort of elemental group, and they take up the same receptor sites in your body. And so if you have an overload of bromine, which is also in the chemtrails, they suck up water here in California with, is it bromide? Yeah, I think it's bromide. So there's these certain receptor sites, and all of those things will take up those receptor sites. If you have an overload of chlorine, which everybody does in cities, right, when they're in city water, fluoride, right, okay, bromine, then since from the 70s, so that iodine, which is essential for life, has all these other things that are really toxic to compete with for those receptor sites in your body. So, so even if you are getting a little bit of iodine, which the iodine in salt is total BS because it evaporates before it even gets to your table. Okay, it's not real. Don't rely on salt. That iodized salt, it's not a real thing. You have to have real Celtic sea salt. That's the best to get. Okay, but anyhow, so if you and then on top of it, radiation. So here I am on the Pacific coast, right? And when Fukushima first happened, that big, huge cloud was coming over to California, and they freaking chemtrailed the heck out of the place, and they created this storm that dropped all of that radiation onto California. I mean, there's people online, there was videos, this guy had a Geiger counter, and he was in the big storm up in Washington, I think, and he was keeping track of the levels of radiation that were dropping down on the West Coast here, and it was just rising crazy on that meter. So if we don't have enough iodine in our bodies, what we call non-radioactive iodine, if we get exposed to radioactive iodine, then our receptors are going to take it in more because we don't have enough non-radioactive iodine. So that's the importance, really importance in this time to make sure that we're getting enough non-radioactive iodine, which is Lugol's, right? You can get Lugol's iodine, you paint it on. Apparently, now all over the world from the meth problem, methamphetamines production, I guess they can use iodine to produce methamphetamines. So they have restricted the kinds of iodine that you can find anymore on the market. Used to be you could find 15% iodine, Lugol's iodine to paint on. I have a bottle. There's still about half a bottle in there, but you can't find that anymore. So, and I don't know, is that just a pretext for keeping, high dosages of iodine away from us? So part of the big scheme to like keep us sick. I don't know. It's just creepy, but I think, we can't rule that out, really. So anyhow, get the highest dosage of a percentage of iodine that you can, the Lugol's iodine. So you can find 2% for sure. Hi, Lizzie. 2% you can find, and you can find 5% also. But what I found now is you can only buy one bottle. You can only get it online, and you can buy one bottle a month. They have it restricted because I guess people are using it to make meth out of. So buy the highest percentage. And if you live in a place that, in a country that has higher percentages of iodine available, maybe you can let us know and we can have you buy iodine for us and ship it out to us. So I hope that, you can make your own iodine. Cool. So Artist just posted on the chat room that you can make your own iodine very easily or cheaply. That would be cool to, if you have a recipe, you could put it in the study or something. Gauze can help you put that in there. That'd be a really good thing to have there. One thing with iodine too, though, is you want to make sure that the source is really clean and it's not radioactive, because, with all the underground bombing, the, here I live near Nevada, and they used to do nuclear testing underground all the time. It's really horrible. So some of the different mineral deposits out there are now radioactive. But, it's really interesting because I was just talking, my husband's from Germany, and they have a lot of different kinds of reports on the TV, and really interesting ones. So, and I knew this about Chernobyl. After Chernobyl happened, there was another a place near Chernobyl that was a mining community where they mined copper, I think, and zinc or something, and it was very, very toxic. All the water was contaminated, and then when Chernobyl happened, on top of all that stuff, they just thought, wow, these villages are going to be just dead, and they went in there and then people weren't dying in those communities. So it was, the authorities were kind of really surprised that, these villages, there's still a lot of people, very few people were dying because it was so toxic. So they went into the homes and they found kvass, K-V-A-S-S, I'm putting in the chat, which is a drink. It's a beet drink. It's a fermented beet drink. It's really good. It's salty. You use Celtic sea salt and whey. So they saw kvass and kombucha on everybody's counter. Everybody was drinking kvass and kombucha in these regions, and nobody was getting sick from it. So that's pretty cool. And then the other thing about, there was some toxic places in Germany too. My husband was telling me, and also in Chernobyl, I heard this also, that in some of the places, there was one place where there was a mine that was really toxic and everybody had to move away. I think this was in Germany where they weren't drinking kombucha. And people left the region, and 40 years later they went back and it had grown over and things were really healthy. So they started looking into the soil, and what happened was that the red worms, which are the composting worms, if you have a composting bin and you use worms in that to help the compost, those are red worms. And they're so good of transmutation. So Stone Hobbit, that's probably something you'd like to, or maybe you already work with the red worms. So they transmute stuff. It's amazing. So they use them in spots in Chernobyl, and they completely transmuted the radioactivity in the soil, and they turned white. So they didn't filter it out, and they didn't do any of those other processes, but the transmutation is what happened. So they transmuted it from a radioactive state to non-radioactive state, and they turned white in the process, and they weren't radioactive, the worms. So that also happened in this place in Germany, just naturally. The water came back, it was clear. The land, there was trees and bushes and fruits, and like everything was really healthy, and it was from the red worms. So, and I think I'm gonna take that. We're gonna talk about parasites next, I think, because that'll be a good segue about red worms. When people are really sick and have gut issues, problems, and they have cancer or diabetes or any kind of those really deep-seated sick problems, most people have parasites. And basically it's because their gut lining is really, really sick. It's very toxic. There's not enough probiotics, not enough enzymes to help break stuff down. And so the parasites have a perfect place to live, right? And the interesting thing about parasites that I learned when I was studying the GAPS diet is that parasites are actually beneficial. I mean, they're not because they're sucking your life force, when they get out of balance. But there's a reason why they come into your body. And mostly, it's like in those examples of the regions in Europe that were really toxic and the worms came in to help heal those regions. The same thing applies to our bodies. So when we get really sick and maybe there's some toxins in our body that a certain worm or a certain virus or whatever, there's thousands of different kinds of parasites that we don't even know about. So scientists are just learning about all the amounts of different kinds of parasites that exist in the human body. But so there was this one woman who was doing this research to try to figure out which diseases or which toxic overloads sort of corresponded to which parasite. So I thought that was so fascinating because so what happens is that, okay, so let's say you have an iron overload or something, or mercury, whatever it is. So there's certain parasites that are attracted to the mercury or attracted to the iodine or the iron in your body that would come in, and they actually help protect your body from that toxin. So even though we look at it and say, oh my God, I've got parasites, or, this person, I've met people who had parasites for, 5 years. They could not get rid of them. And so that's probably what was going on. And this is just being learned about. It's a really new field of study that's being looked into. And so you don't necessarily want to just keep using parasite kill stuff, even if it's herbal. Because for one thing, they're there for a reason, right? That's what we're finding out. The other thing, they're really annoying, so people don't want to keep having parasites. So the way to really get rid of them or to bring them back into balance is to change the internal environment through diet. And so the best way to heal the gut is through meat stock and bone broth and fermented foods. In the GAPS diet, GAPS, let's see, www.gaps.me. I'm putting that in the chat room. So that's the diet that I recommend, and I work with people to heal from really. I've had this one lady, she had diabetes and was taking 14 different medications, and took years, but she's doing way better. I've had people with those years and years and years of parasites, and basically have to go in and reform the inner environment in the gut. And this is a really beautiful way of doing it. It chelates the toxins, brings them out slowly, and at the same time heals the gut and nourishes the body. Because like people who are on their way to getting cancer or have had cancer, most likely they're really malnourished also. Because, turpentine, that's a really interesting thing. Just put on. Like I have one patient who's a cancer patient right now who's, people get so thin and so really depleted. And the doctor that I sent her to that 94-year-old Chinese doctor in Eureka because it just got over my head and I needed help from him. And he's having her really eat a lot of protein now because she got She went in for radiation, and he didn't want her to, but she did, and she got really sick. But I think she's getting better. But so those parasites, yeah, they actually come in. They're actually there to help heal your body. They are just a sign that something's really out of balance, and we need to fix it. But yeah, so artists put in something about turpentine, which is very interesting. I would love to look into that more. I have watched some of her, the doctor who came up with that, a bunch of her videos, so it's really good. You guys should watch that. Dr. Daniels, yeah. So that's a way, to kill them and to get the body back to balance. But to continue it is to create an internal environment that is more in balance, and it's going to keep you in balance. You don't want to keep drinking turpentine the rest of your life. I don't think that that's probably a good thing, but I don't know. Could look more into that. It's cool. So I think I'm going to, maybe I'll take a little break here, Gauze, and have a little music, and then we'll come back in just a little bit here. Keep going. Okay. Hi, welcome back to the show, guys. Thanks for that little break. Had to go refill my drink here, and drinking some kombucha that has elderberries and mineral water in it because it got too strong. So I always water it down with mineral water. It tastes really good. So we were kind of talking about parasites, and I kind of got off into that tangent. I was going to talk about Bigfoot today and little people. But I think what I'll do is continue on, unless people really wanted to talk about Bigfoot. But what I was going, I'll do that another time, because there's a bunch of really interesting stuff about that, because I live in Bigfoot country here. But I do want to get back to the parasites, because I want to talk about, in Chinese medicine, let's see. Yeah, so in Chinese medicine, parasites are considered ghosts, like Ghost, right? A ghost or an entity that attack people, which kind of makes sense. And so they treat him as a ghost. And so basically there's some things that you should know about that, even if you don't believe in ghosts or that that's real or anything like that. There's some really interesting advice that they give to people around that is really sound advice anyway. So one of the things about ghosts or entities is that they really like cold. And so when people have severe gut problems, it's usually in Chinese medicine, the diagnosis is going to be some kind of like cold inside the body or cold in the gut. So the dampness and the phlegm that usually accompanies parasites, with the stools and all that, is considered cold. So one of the things to make sure about, if you're, well, even just in general, like Chinese, the culture, they're really not into cold. Like cold is not your friend, okay? It's beautiful. I love the snow and I love the cold season. But I've talked about this in other shows too, so if you've heard my stuff about how dressing warmly is really important, not allowing yourself to get cold. So the ghost doesn't have a passport, Red was saying. Yeah, you got to get them stop being illegal aliens in our body, right? If you're drinking stuff that's cold or eating cold food or raw food, that can further damage the gut problems. And also if you live in a place that's cold, or, a lot of people are homeless, or living in their car or something. So just to make sure that you have a thermos, that you can have hot water in there, or make some ginger tea, some kind of warming tea. You don't have to drink caffeine all the time, coffee and stuff. So ginger is a really great tea for the gut, and it warms you up. It warms the body and increases the circulation. And it also it helps the enzymes to kick in to help digest food. And enzymes are actually a treatment for parasites. So if people are really overloaded with parasites, some people do enzyme therapy. They take pepsin, and like one of my Chinese teachers says that if anybody with any kind of gut problem, including cancer, colon cancer and stuff, if you eat, and she used this example, canned stuff I don't really like too much, but she used the example of eating a small can of pineapple in the morning before you eat anything else every single day, that will heal any intestinal problem. And it might be because of all the high amounts of enzymes in there. They kill parasites. So when I get people who have colon cancer, I tell them that, eat lots and lots of pineapple. So with the ghosts and the entities, so in traditional Chinese culture, I'm not talking about Chinese government, right? Who's like totally twisted like our governments are. This is people. This is stuff from people. This is information from real people, real communities, right? So in the spiritual realms, they would, just like people in the world, healers, and I know Stone Hobbit and other people talk about what to do for entities and parasites, or those spiritual parasites basically that are could be feeding off of us. So the Taoist is very interesting. Chinese medicine started as a shamanistic practice. It was shamanistic totally. And the shamans were all prepubescent girls. So girls between, before their adolescence, before they started their menses, the menstruation. And the whole family, they were called the Wu. They were in a certain family called Wu, which is W-U. That means 5 in Chinese. And so those Wu families were the shamans. And they were the ones that healed people, that kept, the information about herbs. And these girls would go into trance. And they would talk with the spirits, or talk with, the spirit of the plants. This happened all over the world, but I'm just giving you the Chinese story. And then, so they would heal people like that. They would get information they'd go into trance, get the information, and then come out of it and tell them, you need to thoroughly clean your house. Because for one thing, ghosts and entities in a bunch of different traditions that I've studied are really attracted to junk and to dirty corners and stuff. Like that's just sitting around with nothing to do. It kind of collects dust and stuff. But in these cultures, they say, the ghosts will like to live there because it's just stagnant energy. So one of the big things they would tell people to go, just tidy up your house and get rid of stuff, and, clean those corners up and get, go through the boxes or whatever it is. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the cold. So make sure that the people are not cold, because the ghosts will get attracted to that, and they like to live in that sort of cold environment. So that's, with the ginger tea, is a really good thing for that, because that brings the warmth through your whole body. And just staying away from really super cold drinks and ice cold foods. And that includes raw food. If somebody's really sick like that, they have deep digestive issues. So raw foods are really difficult to eat. And so fermented would be better, but that's a whole other thing. We talked about that before. Some people get really sick with fermented foods, so you got to go slow with that. But so back to the entities in Chinese medicine. So in Chinese culture, that shamanistic family is called the Wu family, right, from a long time ago. And so none of their family used to have to work. everybody was taking care of that girl who was the really important person in the community because she was the shaman. She was the one who was responsible, or, that was her job, to take care of the community's health. And so the family got supported by the whole community to take care of her because she was so important. And it's interesting, during the Cultural Revolution, the Wu families either changed their names, or they went underground, or they left. They went to Korea and other places. And so they because they were persecuted, they were killing all of these families that still held the spiritual understanding of this medicine. And when they exported that medicine, they whitewashed it. They cleaned it all up and took all the spiritual elements, or all the connotations, or the information about spirits and ghosts and just the spiritual realm of things, and they just wanted it to be totally so-called scientific. So it's interesting because my last name, I went to a school called Five Branches Institute, and so there's the five elements theory, and my last name in Spanish means the one who works with five, Quintero. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting little caveat there. So some of the stuff for the parasites would be to address entities, or if there was like severe shocks or traumas in the person's life, or any kind of ongoing stress or Shen disturbance, which would mean like a spiritual imbalance or emotional imbalance. They would really look at the possibility of possession and deal with that. So later on, after this shamanistic period of this medicine happened, and the Taoists kind of came along. And I'm not sure, it'd be interesting for me to, when I retire, I'd like to look into this, of the whole UFO theories and the alien theory of that domination over when they came down and mixed in with humans. Like how all that ties in would be a really fascinating study of, when the Taoists came in. Were the Taoists, from the UFOs? I don't know, because they were all guys and they came in and they had the big hats, and they started, what happened historically was that they started writing down and categorizing what these girls were coming up with when they would go into their trances and come up with treatments for people. And so they came up with diagnosis and categorizing the herbs and the formulas, and even acupuncture treatments, the points and things. A lot of them have spiritual names or names about ghosts, stuff like that. So the Taoists wrote all this stuff down because for, I don't know how long, maybe 1,000 years, I don't know, it was that shamanistic medicine. And then the Taoists came along and they categorized and started writing things down. So some of the oldest texts in the world are medical texts from China. And so those were all written down by Taoists. And then the Confucianists and other people started coming along. But it's interesting, in the Chinese courts, Chinese medicine really came from the people. And then, when that happened, where the dominating, faction came in and they separated and started, had their courts and the imperial families and stuff, the doctors were real people and they couldn't even touch the royal people. So when part of the diagnostic process when you go to an acupuncturist is we feel your pulse and we look at your tongue. Well, to these, elites in China, that was too personal. They didn't want these creepy little human doctors touching their royal princesses and stuff. So they had to do shit like, they would get a string of silk and tie it around their wrist of, their patient who was an elite, right? And they'd have to sit behind a curtain, not even look at the person, because you were too lowly to look at this elite princess or queen or whoever, the emperor. And they had to be able to feel the pulse, because there's 6 different pulses on the hand that we take into consideration. They'd have to have that silk thread around the wrist of a person and feel the pulse behind a curtain and come up with some diagnosis, for them. And if they didn't heal the elite, they'd kill the doctor. It just got really stupid. So the good thing is that they're, through time and starting to heal and really open up the practice, that there are people who've come out of the closet and started talking about their lineages and the stories, the older information. And I have one teacher who is a really amazing Chinese teacher. His name is Jeffrey Yuen, Y-U-E-N. He lives in New York City. And anybody who's an acupuncturist knows who he is. He's amazing. He's like my age, and he looks like he's about, 35 or something. But here's cool. I went to a possession, like a acupuncture, what do they call it? Oh, exorcism kind of class with him once. And it was hours and hours and hours of, he's very, very detailed, and I don't work like that. I'm not very good at remembering complicated stuff. And he's got a lot of information. He channels most of it. But so I remember after like 2 days of all this different herbal formulas and diagnoses and acupuncture treatments and just very complicated stuff. Towards the end, he's like, well, and then actually you could just tell them to leave, and they have to leave. So that's the bottom line. We have the power to tell these stupid jerks, entities, or possession, things that are possessing us or making us have a hard time in life, or making us fight with our partners, or opening us up to a dog attack, or because all these indigenous cultures, they saw all this stuff as related, and that there are forces that are coming at us, and right now we really are in a war. So but our word is so powerful. We are such powerful beings and this is what Jeffrey said at the end of those classes. He was like, the bottom line is, if you can't think of anything else to do, or you could just tell your patients, if they just repeat over and over and over, you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave, then that works. So, any of you guys who feel like you are being attacked and being, bugged or, damaged by these entities, just remember that, just keep saying it over and over and over. It's like sweeping out your thoughts and your beliefs and clean up your areas, how you always feel better when you clean your house. There's a deeper meaning to that too. So I have a question here. Let's see. Ancient Chinese medicine is based on meridians and power points. Does Yolintzli believe healthy bodies need to be running on microelectric fields, i.e. voltage is key to good health? Well, yeah, electrical fields are really important, and we have to be careful of them too. Because if they're electrical fields that are coming from like loose electrical wires and stuff like that, then it could be very detrimental. But the frequencies that we live on are affected by our thoughts. They're affected by the food that we eat. So, and even the way that our food is processed, even if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, the way that food is processed is an electrical field. It's a frequency, and that gets contained. Everything is a frequency. So really important to know where your food comes from, and if you can, get a community garden or plant in pots, or just start to get to know your neighbors, or go out and, if you live in the cities, go to the countrysides and try to find farmers or farms that may need some help. Like if I have lived under the poverty level my whole adult life. Okay, so maybe here that's not as bad as other places. I don't feel like it's bad because I feel like I'm rich. I do what I want. I eat good food. But people here, they look at my income and they go, what? How can you live like that? And I'm just like, I eat really good food all the time. And because I believe that I deserve it. And so our beliefs are so, so important, that we believe that we can nourish ourselves, that we deserve to be nourished. We deserve to live in a clean environment without all these stupid jerks like hanging around trying to bug us all the time. So just like, David Icke, I love what he says about it. He's got these entities that come into his room at night, and he just like flips them off and tells them to fuck off and roll over and goes back to sleep. And that's exactly it. We have that power to do that, and we have to remember it. Because believe me, they're trying, they just keep going and going and going. I can't wait till the day that they just like pack their shit up and leave the planet, so we can start to live like we deserve to live. Like look over in Mexico, and I'm not saying there's probably stuff really bad that's happening. Mexican culture is not ideal. There's a lot of stuff that's messed up, but the example of that town called Cheran, 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 Mexico, Michoacan. That's a state, is Michoacan. So check out those videos on that town. It's just an example of how people getting together can decide to step aside from the whole political, lie, and because those are entities too, they're on a grander scale. And we have these little entities that come through food to us. And then they come through the TV, and they come through politics, and they come, they're everywhere. It's just disgusting. But at the same time, there's just so much beauty and so much vibrancy and life force. So I just think that part of the transformation that's going to, a big part of transforming where we're at to where we want to be and for the future is to get back to the land and to get back to understanding what it means to plant seeds and to have them grow and to deserve to see a beautiful fruition of a garden. And so getting back to finding farmers that are growing organic food, or doing permaculture classes or permaculture farms. There's that guerrilla gardening where people are planting in cities, in vacant lots and stuff. Super important. I have helped to start 2 different community gardens in my life. And one is still here. The other one was in Santa Cruz, and I really sadly just heard that they got rid of it because they wanted to build. The mafia owns that whole area where it was, and we were kind of squatting there, and they took it down. So that's kind of sad. But so getting your hands in the dirt. They're finding out now that dirt has really important probiotics in them that are essential for human health. So, where's that in the schools? I get so excited when I meet people who are taking their kids out of school, I have to say, and just teaching them, taking them on road trips and bringing them to little farms and, starting to grow gardens, because that's really where it's at. We have to get back to our food production. And so finding farmers, I've heard of people going out and they'll do trades. They'll say, can I weed for you, or hoe something, or water, or clean your gardening room up, or your greenhouse, just help to do stuff on the farm for trade, for food. And then they have that whole WOOF program. It's called WOOF. You guys can look that up, WOOF. And I think that one is where you can travel around and find farms. Usually they're small farms, organic or permaculture farms where they need help. And so you can live there and they'll feed you in exchange for work. So that's another option, to start to get back to the land and get back to being part of the life cycle. Because it's just been so many years and centuries, really, of being part of this death cycle. And, in Native American culture, when Columbus first came over to Mexico, he sent back, there's a letter that he sent to the Queen of Spain saying that here in America that there's too much abundance. And he used those words. So there's too much abundance, there's too much beauty, there's too much generosity, and there's too much good health. Too much. He used that, all those things. And so there's a famous quote that he said of those things, but with a lot of the quotes they left out was that with 500 troops we could just decimate them all. So that's the consciousness that came over here, and it came to all over the world. So they did it, you guys know that, they did it in the UK, they've done it here, they've done it in Japan and China, everywhere. And so where we're at right now is such an amazing place to be because we're all remembering together. How do we crawl back out of that shit, And I just love this People for People radio because each one of us who's standing forward, I mean, believe me, I thought I was going to have a heart attack when I first started doing these shows because it's scary in a way. But, there's just so much courage, and even in the chat room of people talking about their experiences of, feeling targeted or feeling like, oh my God, what are they, one day they shot a freaking bullet through my bedroom window, here. I don't know if it was just some kids, I'm hoping it was, but whatever. And so, yeah, just getting back to that place where we're engaged in life force and in food production and helping each other out and stuff. So I'm really so grateful to this radio station because it just all the different hosts that are on here have a key to their gift. Their gifts are being developed. Our gifts are being developed here together. And so we each can add a little piece or a little understanding of the whole circle of life. And so I'm really grateful to the people who have had shows before me and who've been in the chat room a lot. So I'll just say hi to Angel and Artist and Ben, Kremu, Crazy Fox, Lizzie, Gaz, Red, Stone, Vanessa, and me. And there was a bunch of people on there too before. So just thank all the people who are out in the world right now too. And all the hosts and Gaz, of course, our illustrious producer. So I don't know if there was any other questions, but I'm kind of feeling like maybe it's a good place to wrap it up. If you know recipes, you're sorted for the week. So vegetarian. Yeah, you know what? One thing about vegetarian, so if you are a vegetarian, just making sure you're eating enough fat is super important. Okay, so avocados, okay, they're okay, you can do them, but I wouldn't go overboard with them because they're not meant to eat a ton of them. Okay, for one thing about what I talked about, Chiran and all those places being turned into avocado orchards, that's a slavery industry in some ways. So, just moderation. And then coconut, same thing, really. The coconut groves. So moderation. And how do you get there? Well, okay, so maybe you could get yourself to eat some butter, right? Butter is local. It's everywhere. Or ghee. You know, ghee is just clarified butter, but it's a fat. It's a healthy fat, and it will really help you to step more fully towards deep health. Okay, so that's my one little thing for the vegetarians today. Walnuts, yeah, so make sure you're soaking your walnuts, Stone. Soak all your nuts and seeds and legumes and grains, right? I don't know if you heard the show before about the importance of soaking seeds and nuts, and that's a traditional thing. Everybody around the world did that. Either sprouted them or soaked them or left them in the fields for a while, and then they sprouted on their own. So it breaks down this thing. It's a natural, like a fungicide or a protectant for this. It's because the seeds are the reproduction part of the plant. So they naturally have this thing in them to keep the fungus and the bacteria from killing the seeds. And so you have to break that down, and that happens through soaking. So really, really important to soak all that stuff, okay? I love you guys. I think I'm going to stop here. And I also put something, oh gosh, did I put that? I'm going to make sure it's in there. I'm going to put something about, what do they call it, plant-based milk. So if you're doing that, you have to make it yourself. And I'm going to put something in the study under the food section about that. There's a really good article, and there's some recipes. And then also I'm going to put a recipe for making soda. It's really delicious, okay? So I'll put that in there. Love you guys. Thank you so, so much for being on today. I really appreciate all your support and the good comments and everything. So peace out, guys. I'll see you next time.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!